ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So we were discussing Sri Ramakrishna's conversation where he says that one can follow the path of devotion and yet attain the knowledge of Brahman too. This is contrary to the normal view of Jnanis, the path of Jnana, where they say devotion may in fact hamper the path of knowledge, because knowledge of Brahman presupposes that you have done everything, you have done away with everything. It is the path of neti neti, na iti, not this, not this. It's a very simple path in the sense it appears to be a very simple path if one is convinced. One has the Maha Mantra where he says, where the student says, asks the Guru with whom he is trying to learn the essence of the Upanishads or Vedanta, which according to the path of knowledge is to realize one's real nature as Brahman, Sat, Chit and Ananda. So that is what the Upanishads say. Of course, the word Sat, Chit and Ananda came much later. If you see the Upanishads, there are different ways. The Mahavakya says Prajnanam Brahma. That is, the consciousness itself is Brahman. In fact, they do not ascribe any gender to Brahman. Brahman is neither he nor she. That's why they prefer to call it it. The Brahman, it. They do not call Brahman he or she, because the moment you talk of gender, you fall within the realm of Maya, according to Vedanta, or according to Sankhya, it is Prakriti. So the difference between male and female, uh, feminine and masculine, that comes under the purview of Sankhya, purview of Prakriti, according to Sankhya. But Vedanta or the Advait Vedanta people, they will say it is just a manifestation. It's just a Maya, which is an appearance. So called, it's like an appearance. It is the superimposition of untruth on truth because of avidya or ignorance, the mode avidya which is there. That, as it were, misguides, or that uh, the followers of path of jnana, that's why they want to negate everything and say na iti, not this. They cannot be attached to anything in the world. That is a very, very difficult path. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, though the Brahmos wanted to talk of the great formless Brahman in whom they wanted to immerse themselves. There's that famous Kathamrita incident, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We discussed it, that the Brahmos were in the Brahmo Samaj temple, and most of their prayers, because Brahmos believed that any kind of devotion or any kind of worship of God with form or especially image is sacrilege. It is not to be allowed. So, in their prayer rooms, or maybe you can say prayer halls, they used to recite many verses which were composed by the famous Brahmo singers or the poets, saying that formless God. But they would not say that they are without any quality. He was compassionate, he was kind, like some of the Semitic religions. You ask them, they say God is without form. But at the same time, they say he's quite compassionate, he's so kind, and that is why the scientists found it difficult to accept such a God. Said, if he is formless, how can he be kind? So, we find that when Sri Ramakrishna spoke of the path of jnana, he did not say that path is not correct, but he said that path can be accessed through other means also. And these Brahmo devotees, they said, we believe in the formless Brahman, he is kind, compassionate, and he is the only one that exists. Then Sri Ramakrishna just stopped them. He said, if everything else is Maya, if everything else does not exist, then what will happen to the women? He pointed out, Oder ki hobe, what will happen to those people who are behind the screens? Women were allowed to attend these meetings but not sit with men, as was the rule those days. They had to be, they were forced to sit in places, they were hidden by the common gaze, common view. So they said, what will happen to those women there? Now, how will they survive if you wish away everything? So the path of knowledge, according to that traditional school, is very difficult. But for the first time, Sri Ramakrishna said, he can also impart the knowledge of Brahman to a follower of the path of devotion. For example, if somebody believed, or not only believed, but worshipped his Ishta, or the God with form, and asked him how Brahmagana could be experienced, and he wanted to experience the knowledge of Brahman. We see in Thakur's case also, Tutapuri came, he asked him to meditate on the formless God, and he could not do it. He says, the moment I try to focus on the formless God, my Ma Kali appears, because she was, Bhavatarani was always in his mind. She was so dear to him. So the question arises, and in fact, Totapuri also believed that worshipping Ma Kali or any other goddess or god with form uh, is not conducive to the experience of Brahman. But Sri Ramakrishna wanted to experience, he wanted to know how formless God is experienced. So he said, it is okay, I'll ask my mother, he told Tutapuri before sannyas, I'll ask my mother and take her permission. Can I follow the path of knowledge? So Tutapuri was amused. He was very much amused. He said, what kind of person he is? Who is the mother he is speaking of? He thought perhaps he will go and ask his biological mother. But he goes to the temple, and literally the mother, divine mother, speaks to him as she used to do whenever he was in a predicament, whenever he had any problems. He used to go to her and she used to she smilingly said, yes, you go. And when he got permission, Totapuri just smiled, thinking is that this person, though he is such a great sadhaka or such a great adhikari to experience this knowledge of Brahman, still he has some attachment. Uh, yes, still so much attachment to the form which he was worshipping. That is why people who worship God with form, that is what Totapuri and all the Advaitins believed. So he said he is so much attached. He is so much attached to the form he was worshipping. Ma Kali or Ma Bhavatarani was the object of his worship right from beginning. And he could give up the world for her. But how could he give up the mother on whom he depended so much? And he was devoted to mother so much. So Totapuri just scolded him and said, no, you meditate between the eyebrows, and whenever the form of mother appears in your consciousness, just use the sword of knowledge. It's a figurative way of telling. He says, just use the sword of knowledge and cut the image that you see with the sword of knowledge. It's not that you physically cut, but force your mind to see the formless aspect of Brahman. So by the grace of mother, by following the path of devotion, Sri Ramakrishna uh, could get an experience of the knowledge of Brahman. So that is why he says, he means God can impart the knowledge of Brahman also to a follower of path of devotion. But generally speaking, he says, he can give him the knowledge of Brahman, but he doesn't seek that. Why does he not seek? He does not seek knowledge of Brahman. He wishes to retain the ego, the I-ness of I am your servant, you are my master. That is one relationship which we can develop with a personal God. You can either say, because the duality, the path of devotion, or those who follow the path of devotion, they wish to have some kind of sweet relationship with God. They don't want to become one with that. As Thakur used to say, Ami chini khete chai, chini hote chai na. What does he mean by that? That I want to taste sugar, I don't want to become sugar. So these are all very beautiful examples Sri Ramakrishna gave. So he says, the devotee does not want, if he wants his divine mother or the form which he worships can transform itself and show him the formless aspect of reality. But he wants to retain that I-ness, that ego, that I am, that Paka Ami, as it is said, the ripe ego, that I am your servant, you are my master, I am your child, you are my mother. So, that kind of ego distinction he wants to maintain. He doesn't like to become one with reality. So he says, if he wants, the person, the sadhaka can attain knowledge of Brahman through the path of devotion, which happened in the case of Sri Ramakrishna. He told his mother, I wish to see how they experience God, how the Advaitins. So he wanted to try and take the sannyas diksha in a very secret way because his mother was alive. So mother permitted him, and only when in the vision he got permission from his divine mother Bhavatarani, he goes to Totapuri and says, now you can initiate me, and then he gets the experience of Brahman. So Vijay Krishna Goswami, who is sitting there, asks another question. Will the people who reason according to Vedanta also attain him? I mean, now he says that those who follow the path of devotion definitely uh, reach or experience Brahman. But will the people who reason, who use their reasoning, who try to reason out everything by following the path of Neti Neti, will they also attain him? Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, he can also be attained by the path of reasoning and discrimination. This path is known as Jnana Yoga. So it doesn't discount or it doesn't say that that is not the right path. Whether one is fit or not, that one has to decide oneself. But he says it is possible. But he gives, there's a rider attached to this. He says the path of reason is very difficult. I told you about 7 planes. Now in another place he talks of this 7 planes. कि वेदे सप्त भूमि आचे, सप्त भूमिर कथा आचे. Means there is this mention of the 7 planes of existence in the Vedas. So only when the mind reaches the 7 planes, these 7 planes correspond to the 6 chakras. When you cross the 6 chakras, you pass through the Sahasrara and you attain Samadhi. So mind reaching the 7th plane means the consciousness rises from the lowest chakra to the highest and then transcends it. One attains Samadhi when the mind reaches the 7th plane. So on genuine realization that Brahman is real and the world illusory, the mind merges into what? It becomes, the mind dissolves into the creation, dissolves into the creator. We know Vedanta says, just as a spider forms the web out of its own existence and creates this whole network of Maya, so also the creator through his own power creates this universe. It's not that he creates it out of some other material. God does not do that, as believed by many Semitic religions, that God takes the fundamental matter from the universe and creates the world on one fine morning. That doesn't happen. The creator himself the creator projects Brahman projects by the power of Maya this world and then finally withdraws it into himself. That is what the Upanishad says. Upanishad very clearly says, Yatha Urnanabhi. Urnanabhi means the spider creates the web. From its own body, the web is created not by some external material, but it is created out of one's own being, the spider's own being, Urnanabhi. The spider creates the whole universe and then moves around in that web. It cannot transcend the web and then it again withdraws itself. So, similarly, the mind reaches the it crosses the seventh plane or reaches the seventh plane, crosses the six chakras and reaches the seventh plane, one attains samadhi. On genuine realization that Brahman is real and the world illusory. See, for the Gyanis, it is mandatory. It is mandatory to call the world illusory. However beautiful, however nice, however dear, the Bhakta is allowed the privilege of considering the world the possession of God or God's world, and he can enjoy that relationship, but not the Gyani. The Gyani cannot even for a moment think that the world is real, that anything that belongs to the world, if it is real for me, then I am not a Gyani. For a Gyani, it becomes difficult for the reason that his mind is still very active. The mind has not merged, transcended the six chakras and reached the seventh plane. Only then he can reach Samadhi. When he reaches the seventh plane, where is the world? Where is the family? Where is the treasures? Where is all the possessions? Everything vanishes. So, we have a very funny incident where Swami Vivekananda, who was one of the very, very few who was considered by Sri Ramakrishna to be fit for non-dual knowledge, once was making a remark and Holy Mother overheard it. He says, nowadays I am in such a state of mind. He had so much of vairagya. He had already left his house and he was just moving around here and there. He had that real spirit that the world was really illusory. So he was mentioning in Bengali that the whole world is non-existing for me. So everything is flying away. সব উড়িয়ে যাচ্ছে, কিছুই থাকছে না, মানে everything is flying away. He doesn't have anything to do the world or anything of the world. So everything is flying away. Then Holy Mother just cautioned him because she wanted that he should, Sri Ramakrishna also wanted and he also wanted that the work which falls under the realm of Prakriti should be done by him. So because of their wish, because of Sri Ramakrishna's wish, Holy Mother also politely reminded him and made fun of him and said, oh, but you can make everything fly, everything vanish, because I know you don't have any attachment towards anything, but just don't make me fly away. Then Swami Vivekananda immediately realizes. Then he says, oh, no, how is it possible? If mother goes away, then what remains? Means Prakriti. Prakriti, she is the representative of Shakti. So with her power or with her support or with her strength, even the Gyani realizes that Brahman is real and the world is illusory. And the mind experiences Samadhi. But that path to be done without the grace of God is difficult. But in Kali Yuga, Sri Ramakrishna says, the life of a man depends on food. Then how can he understand that Brahman is real and the world illusory? Such awareness does not come without getting rid of the body consciousness. That day and night, if one repeats, I am not neither the body nor the mind nor the 24 cosmic Sankhya principles of Sankhya. I am beyond the pleasure and pain. I am beyond all pleasure and pain. Nothing can shake me from my faith. That kind of strength, which Swamiji of course had, he had. But even to get the work done, he was reminded by mother that don't make everything fly away, not at least not your mother. If you make me fly away, then that would not be good. Then Swamiji immediately understood. Said, if yes, 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 without mother, what can I do? So these are all deeply significant incidents. So though he could get rid of his body consciousness, and he was in a position to do so, because Sri Ramakrishna had said, you have tasted the mango, but I will, you have not tasted the mango, you have tasted that bliss. I know you want to remain in that kind of samadhi or in the seventh plane, but the lock to that room is with me, and the key is with me. I will open it only when your work is done. So that's why, though he had a capacity to reach the seventh plane, and he in fact had a glimpse of that even while Sri Ramakrishna was alive. It was Sri Ramakrishna who told him to not to merge into that. So, but at the same time, the path of bhakti is more conducive in this Kali Yuga. That is why, because Sri Ramakrishna says, Annagata Prana. The life of man depends on food. Then how can he understand that Brahman is real and the world illusory? Such awareness, he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, tells Vijay Krishna Goswami, you have to be genuine. Have you got rid of the body consciousness? Have you been firmly established in the idea that I am neither the body nor the mind nor the 24 cosmic principles? I mean, the whole of creation is represented by the 24 cosmic principles of Sankhya. So he says, how can I am beyond, in that state, again he says, I am beyond all pleasure and pain. Let anything come. Sri Ramakrishna was suffering from cancer. There was tremendous pain, but all he had to do is just withdraw the mind away from that. So they firmly believe that how can I have disease and sorrow, old age and death? So whatever was happening, Sri Ramakrishna was taking everything in his stride. So when people said, why don't you just for our sake at least eat a little food? He said, am I not eating? Mother told me that are you not ashamed of yourself? Are you not eating through so many mouths? Then why do you say that I want to eat? Then he says, I felt ashamed. That was the vision he had. So how can I have disease? How can I have sorrow? How can I have old age? That kind of tremendous strength comes to the one who is following, who has such a kind of realization, which is very difficult, because our body is annagata prana. In Kali Yuga, the body is dependent on food or the prana. So our prana needs material existence for survival, for bare survival at least, if not anything else. But he says such a realization is extremely difficult in this Kali Yuga. However much you may reason, the conviction that I am the body creeps in somehow and shows itself. It then, the famous Ashwatha example is given. Ashwatha tree example is given. That is why when we discuss the Bhagavad Gita, unfortunately the class is at 5:45. Many of you cannot attend that. But we will be doing the same in the new castle, where there have been, the students whom I met, or maybe the people whom I met, they are really have studied Gita so thoroughly for so many years. The person who is organizing has created a Gita foundation, and he has been teaching not only to the kids. There were some white people. One Mr. Terry was there. I was pleasantly surprised to see him, who is so much devoted. So there also I mentioned on the last Friday when I was there, I mentioned to them that Gita has to be studied very patiently. You can't just read Gita as if you read a novel. So everything that the Lord utters, whether it is in the gospel or whether it is Sri Krishna's message, we will be celebrating Janmashtami on 18th of August. We'll be doing it in our center here in a small way, and after that 19th I will be coming to Scotland. But the idea that Sri Ramakrishna is expressing is directly taken from the Gita. In the sense, Gita refers to in the Vibhuti Yoga, where a lot of Vibhutis are discussed. So people tend to skip. Most of the people who follow the path of Jnana or the path of Bhakti, they said, what is there? There's nothing about devotion or anything. The Lord himself says, I am the Himalayas among the things that do not move, Stavaranam Himalayas. Then Ashwatha Sarva Vrukshanam. In amongst all the trees, I am Ashwatha tree. Why? Why is Ashwatha considered? There are other trees. The Lord Sri Krishna says, I am the Ashwatha among trees. There can be other trees, but even that utterance in the Gita has some deep significance. Because when we are unable to meditate on the formless God, we meditate on God with form. We see forms around us. We see Ashwatha trees, we see lions, we see the Himalayas, we see mountains, snow peaks. We see so many objects in and around us. Why single out certain things as it has been described in uh, uh, the Vibhuti Yoga chapter of the Gita? Because through these wonderful examples of creation, we can aspire to meditate on the Creator. So why does Ashwatha represent the Lord much better than any other tree? Here, Sri Ramakrishna is telling us, you may cut down an Ashwatha tree, the whole tree, and think its roots are dead, but the very next morning you will see that a new sprout has appeared. The feeling of body does not go away similarly. So, just to show how difficult is the path of knowledge, Sri Krishna there are two reasons why he is saying I am Ashwatha. He wants to convey that I am more permanent by way of permanency compared to the other things, other trees. Ashwatha tree is more permanent. That is why it is considered to be sacred. That eternal nature is seen in that particular tree. So also the eternal nature of Prakriti. Side by side with the Purusha, Sankhya says Prakriti is eternally existence. She refuses to go away. That is why we say we want the grace of Shakti to be with us. Shakti, who represents Prakriti, without her grace, we cannot have the knowledge of Brahman. Because she is, according to Sri Ramakrishna, Brahman and Shakti are Abhed. They are not different. Brahma or Shakti Abhed. So the Ashwatha tree gives us a hint that no matter how much you cut, again that consciousness of body will appear. The feeling of body, he says, that's why path of jnana is difficult, because it is so difficult to get rid of this idea. You may get rid of many other things. You may get rid of possessions, you may get rid of the things that you are surrounded with, but how can you get rid of the idea of your own body? How can you jump out of your body? It is not possible. So, Sri Ramakrishna concludes by saying, thus the path of devotion is good and easy, and an easy path in this age. Now we come to the next uh, conversation or example Sri Ramakrishna is giving. আমি চিনি হতে চাই না, আমি চিনি খেতে চাই. I don't want to become sugar. He is continuing, he is telling Vijay Krishna Goswami, and he says, I don't want to become sugar. I want to taste it. I never feel like saying I am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, the Mahavakya. I say, you are my Lord and I am your servant. Now, he is telling Vijay Krishna Goswami, don't be hypocritical. Like the Brahmos, whenever he went, something which you cannot do, why do you repeat that? Something that you cannot attain, why do you repeat that? He himself puts in that himself in that place. And he says, see, it is difficult for me, that's why I don't like. I just say, you are my Lord and I am your servant. That dualism I prefer, because I want to taste the bliss of sugar. I don't want or taste the bliss or sweetness of sugar. I don't want to become that. So Sri Ramakrishna says it is good to play between the fifth and sixth planes. That is, you can even transcend the sixth chakra, but if you it's good to be between the fifth and sixth chakras or fifth and sixth planes. After crossing the sixth plane, that is Sapta Bhumi, that is what he said, the seventh plane. I have no desire to stay on the seventh plane for long. My desire is to sing his name and glory. So Sri Ramakrishna says, I voluntarily prevent my mind from crossing the seventh plane because I want to enjoy. He also called that state as Bhava Mukha. In the Gospel, we will find that state where he says, by the grace of Mother, I could remain, I could cross the door and then come back. Bhavamukha is like there are two rooms and there is a small door which is open. So you have one foot on the other side. You can as well go to the seventh plane and then come back, or maybe you can, because after seventh plane, Sri Ramakrishna says, you will never come back. But he says it's good to oscillate between the fifth and sixth plane. It is good to play. That is what he said. My desire to sing his name, his glories, and always consider him or the Lord as the master is very good. He says, look, everybody says that, uh, everybody says that the wave belongs to the Ganges, not the Ganges which belong to the wave. Nobody says that. So he's giving that example. So he says the attitude of servant, that I am the servant and he is the Lord, is very good. The path of devotion is very good, because giving an example, he said there are waves in the Ganga, and if one of the waves says that Ganga belongs to me, instead of saying I belong to the Ganga, it is not correct, because wave is a small part of the entire water of the Ganges. So everybody says that the wave belongs to the Ganges. That is the truth. We are part of Ishvara, not Ishvara is not a part of us. The feeling that I am he, now this is for people who are following the path of devotion or who are not capable to follow the path of devotion, path of knowledge. He says, the feeling that I am he is not good. If a person entertains such a feeling of I-ness but retains identification with the body, with his body, it will bring a great harm to him. He won't advance further. On one side, he has a firm consciousness of his body. That means he is part of the world and he likes to be part of the world. If he has the consciousness that he is the body, that means he is still attached to the world. So it will do harm to him because he won't advance further. He will be under the impression that I am an Advaitin, I am one with that Brahman, but at the same time he is one with his body. He will get stuck to it. As Sri Ramakrishna said, somebody wanted to go by boat. He had not removed the anchor. The uh, anchor was fixed to the ground, and that's why the anchor was fixed to the boat, and that is why it could not move, though he was rowing very hard. So those who follow the path of knowledge, but at the same time retain their identification with the body, they will not advance further. He won't advance further. In fact, it will bring a lot of harm to him, because he cannot understand And because he cannot understand his own predicament, his own problem, that even though he is attached to the body, he still, even though he is attached to the body, he is saying that he is one with Brahman. He deceives himself and others. So that is why Swami Sri Ramakrishna was very particular not to the books like Ashtavakra Samhita and other things. When Naren came, he said, "You read that." But he used to hide those books when and not allow even Swami Abhedananda and others to read those books, because he believed that will harm their devotional temperament. And in fact, he admonished Abhedanandaji once when when Swami Vivekananda wanted to impose certain ideas on him. And he says, he not only deceives himself, but he deceives others. And gradually he goes down spiritually. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna scolded Narendra for two reasons. First, he said, by destroying his devotional temperament, you have done some harm to him. Moreover, by spending all your power, you have done harm to yourself. If you do that, your spirituality will be lessened. So that is the great danger. Then he explains to Vijay Krishna Goswami the two kinds of devotion and who is the most eligible aspirant and what are the means to God realization. Even in the path of Jnana, the first thing that one does, even before the study is resumed or study has begun, by the Guru tests the disciple by telling him or explaining to him whether he is a adhikari or not. Who is the most eligible aspirant who can study Jnana? That is the idea, but here is speaking of devotion. Just as the path of Jnana, in the path of Jnana, the Guru has to determine the most eligible aspirant. He also has to, on the path of Bhakti also, the Guru has to determine or has to decide what kind of love for God you have. So first you have to describe what are the different kinds of devotion, then who are eligible for these different paths and what are the means. If you are eligible, then how do you go about doing it? So devotion alone does not enable one to realize God. That is another thing which you have to remember. See, in between all these paragraphs, if we read the gospel superficially, we don't miss certain words or sentences. M was so particular. That is why it is very, very essential to ask somebody who wants to follow the spiritual path according to Sri Ramakrishna. We just ask him, just have you read the gospel? They will say, yes, I have read the gospel, I have read this. But reading is something different. Understanding is more important. Now here he says by devotion you can get Brahma Jnana. Now again he is warning Vijay Krishna Goswami, because he should not feel, okay, if devotion can give me help me realize God or realize the Brahman, then let me follow this, because I can have my world also. I need not detach with the world. It's such a comfortable religion, so that a person who is very much attached to the world, because Sri Ramakrishna has told him that it is an easy path. Vijay Krishna Goswami, of course, who was preaching at the same time getting a salary for that, he asked, or he had a question in mind. So anticipating that question, Sri Ramakrishna says, gives him a warning, but don't think devotion is also so easy. Devotion alone will not help you or enable you to realize God. I mean, simple bhakti, unless you have an intense love for God, prema bhakti as it is known. There are two types of bhakti. One is Prema Bhakti, Raga Bhakti, and Vaidhi Bhakti. So we have to find out what are the two or three types of devotion that are mentioned in the devotional scriptures. So he says, unless you have Prema Bhakti or the intense love for God, you cannot attain Him. It's not just ordinary Bhakti. That means there are some other varieties of Bhakti also. The second is Raga Bhakti, passionate devotion, intense longing, intense attachment to the Ishta. Before intense love, where one forgets one's own self, which is Prema Bhakti, one develops Raga Bhakti. Passionate devotion, Raga Bhakti, is another name for intense love. It's another name, it's another variety of intense love. So, whether it is Raga Bhakti, you call it Raga Bhakti or Prema Bhakti, you should have that kind of Bhakti. Not Vaidhi Bhakti, which we will discuss. He discusses now. Without intense love, you cannot realize God. Without loving God, you cannot attain Him. There is another kind of devotion known as ritualistic devotion. Now, this is known as Vaidhi Bhakti. This is the category in which a majority of humankind falls. That is why Sri Ramakrishna is mentioning this, especially to Vijay Krishna Goswami, because whenever we talk of human capacity to understand the higher spiritual truths, you will find that there is a gradation in their attempts or in their efforts. So, our scriptures are wise. They don't prescribe the same medicine for the same disease. There are doses. For example, in homeopathic, the potency has to be high in some cases. But for milder forms of disease, you give a lower potency because that may cause some after effects. So, everybody is not fit for the highest kind of devotion. It begins with Vaidhi Bhakti. So, what is this Vaidhi Bhakti? Where you have to repeat the name of God a fixed number of times. We all begin our sadhana. We are at least supposed to begin our sadhana if we are sincere about our spiritual practices, that we have to repeat the name of God a fixed number of times. That is why we take mantra diksha. The very idea is that some commitment is made. It is known as spiritual initiation because we are just beginning. Till then we were just beating around the bush, as they say in England. We are just beating around the bush, trying this, trying that, trying so many things. But when we become a little serious, we go to a teacher, a spiritual preceptor, and try to find out what is the best path for me. Once that path has been determined, then we perhaps the first thing we have been asked to do as part of our sadhana is to repeat the name of God a fixed number of times. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is mentioning here. Along with this, you must fast, go on pilgrimage. So that is what every one of us understand. That is what Vaidhi Bhakti is, what is normally taught and understood to be Bhakti. And many people stagnate at that level, thinking that, oh, he's full of Bhakti. Early morning he gets up, he does this, he fasts, he doesn't eat, doing this, doing that, not doing this, not doing that, eating this food, not eating that food, going on pilgrimage regularly, going if there is a place of worship, if there is a temple, worshipping God in a prescribed manner, making so many sacrifices, and so on. All these things are fall under the realm of Vaidhi Bhakti. These are all part of ritualistic devotion. Now, by practicing it, you gradually gain a Raga Bhakti, intense devotion. But unless you get that, you cannot realize Him. But God cannot be realized as long as you don't have this intense love for Him. Here we come to another incident of Srimad Bhagavatam. It is known as Kapila Devahuti Samvada. Kapila, who is the founder of the Sankhya tradition, the Sankhya philosophy. He is supposed to be an incarnation of God in that sense. The founder of Sankhya, Kapila Muni. So, in the Gita also, he says, among all the Gyanis, among all the great rishis, I am Kapila Muni. So, he is considered to be full of vibhuti. The vibhuti that he has is the wonderful knowledge of Sankhya, which has been used in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita as Sankhya. It is mentioned by Sri Krishna as the Sankhya Yoga. The Sthita Prajna Lakshana also is mentioned there. But anyway, the part of ritualistic devotion which we undergo, which everybody undergoes, a fixed number of times, or regular japa, regular going to the pilgrimage places, and other things that we do, there are many sacrifices. So, in the Bhagavata also, which is supposed to be a volume dealing, I mean, it's a book dealing with the tradition of bhakti, especially Krishna bhakti or Vishnu bhakti. In Bhagavata itself, Kapila Muni's conversation with his mother Devoti, who belonged to the first category. She was expert in Vaidhi bhakti. He tells her son that all my life, when my husband was alive, I did Vidhi as part of the as as prescribed by the scriptures. I never made any mistake. I performed everything according to the scriptures. That means she was talking of Vaidhi bhakti. Then she says, when my husband passed away, that is what happened. And the Kapila Muni, young Kapila, was growing up, said, even then I did not falter. According to my capacity, I don't remember having committed any mistake as far my puja and all the ritualistic Vaidhi bhakti is concerned. But before you go, because you are going and taking the path of sannyasa, which I know is the supreme step that one has to take, at least in spirit. So you are leaving, before you leave, give me some piece of wisdom which I may use to enhance my knowledge. The Vaidhi bhakti that I have, as far as I know, I have not made a single mistake. But I just want to know from you, why, in spite of all these rituals and the Vaidhi bhakti that I have been following all my life till today, why am I not having that kind of peace in mind, that kind of bliss which is spoken of in the scripture? She has willingly allowed her son to go. Not that she was attached to the world. She knew what Vaidhi bhakti was, and she practiced it for years and years together. But that gave her humility. As Sri Ramakrishna says, by practicing it gradually you gain raga bhakti, intense devotion. Now that stage has come, but she wants some guidance, and she turns to her own son for this guidance. And then he tells her the answer, Kapila Devahuti Samvada. So he's telling the response he gives to his mother is the essence, is the central message of Bhagavata according to Swami Ranganathanji. He wrote a small booklet. He gave a talk which has now been published as a small booklet, the central message of Srimad Bhagavatam. In that he mentions this. There are other things, but this Kapila Devahuti Samvada, he is trying to describe that. And he says, he quotes a verse, I mean, there is a verse there where Kapila is telling his mother, you did all these rituals, you did everything perfectly as a dutiful wife would do, a dutiful mother would do, and God has rewarded you also with that kind of Vaidhi bhakti. But the fact that you still don't feel some peace in your mind, heart, or some kind of joy in your heart, the reason is that you have not understood that bhakti has not been raised to the level of raga bhakti, that intense love, which is again based on jnana. the You worshipped him in your own heart. If you worshipped him in images, you worshipped him outside, but you did not worship him where he really resides, in your own heart and in the heart of other people. Ignoring him in the heart of other people, ignoring him perhaps in your own heart. And that is the reason why we are asked again and again, all the scriptures, especially those who have been given a particular path, who have graduated from Vaidhi Bhakti to this Raga Bhakti, they are advised by their gurus, whichever tradition they follow, to search for that reality which way they were looking outside within their own heart. And when they do it, they slowly become eligible for this Raga or Prema Bhakti. So, as long as you don't get that, Kapila Muni tells his mother, you will not find that peace which comes only after realization. If you have that kind of love, if you graduate from that ritualistic worship and not just say that I am very sincerely reading books, I am spending my whole time doing this stotra, that stotra, doing a little bit of japa as the Guru has told, fine, that is part of Vaidhi Bhakti. But at the same time, I am immersed in many other things. Perhaps I love my money more than God. I love God, definitely. Vaidhi Bhakti is there. I love God, but I love my money more than God. I love my children more than I love God. I may love my parents and all the people around me. The many people, many things, and many objects in the world which have first priority in my life. So one has to be honest, and he says, I do not have that intense love for God, right? At least right now. So Kapila is telling his mother, you have grown old, you are very nice, you have never made a mistake, and that is why you have this Vaidhi Bhakti. But if you really want peace of mind, even in this old age, nothing is lost. You can still get that kind of peace or that kind of highest realization if you have intense love for him. When you are, now Sri Ramakrishna adds, he is hinting at Vijay Krishna Goswami. He says, when your worldly way of thinking disappears completely and your mind goes to him 100%, then only then you attain God. So, and then he gives a few examples. I'll conclude now. If there are some questions, we can discuss about it. But then he gives an example, which will continue in our next class, about Prahlada. He says some people perform Vaidhi Bhakti for a long time before graduating or before being eligible for Raga Bhakti, like uh, Kapila's mother Devahuti. She was a very sincere and very sincere to her Vaidhi Bhakti, which she was doing right from the day, I mean, right from childhood, she was doing. She's supposed to be a very, very dutiful mother, a very uh, dutiful wife, and also she was very particular about following the scriptural injunctions. But because she said she did not have peace, Kapila just gave her a hint that you have done it very sincerely, thinking God to be outside. That is the nature of Vaidhi Bhakti. We think God is there, perhaps He is in our shrine, sometimes He is in our shrine, sometimes we call upon Him when we are in trouble, and then we expect God to solve that small trouble. Then it is a part of Vaidhi Bhakti. Nothing wrong with that, but that will not give us peace and true realization. But he says that's not true for all. Everybody does not have to go the way of Devahuti. Some people are born, like Kapila Muni himself was born with knowledge. Some people acquire loving devotion naturally, right from childhood. They are born that way. Being perfect from childhood, they weep for God at an early age, as Prahlada wept for Vishnu. Ritualistic devotion is like moving a fan to make a breeze. You see how beautifully Sri Ramakrishna is giving examples. The ordinary fan which they use, the hand fan, he says the ritualistic devotion is just like a fan, which when if you move it, it will give you a breeze. You will eventually attain love. You need a fan to create a breeze. You need something. These external things which fan the devotion, the love of God within you. You have to keep doing it. Not that this ritualistic devotion is bad. Vaidhi Bhakti to begin with is essential. That is what mantra means. We start with the Vaidhi Bhakti. We go on chanting the mantra with the hope that one day that mantra becomes Chaitanya, it becomes awakened. The power of mantra is not realized as soon as one gets initiation. One has to go on doing it, persistently doing it. When the mantra awakens, the Chaitanya within the mantra awakens. That is what Swami Vireshwaran used to say. Many people come, he said, come to me that nothing is happening. But the mantra has to awaken. It is still in a sleepy state. We are still in the Vaidhi level. We have to simultaneously meditate on the Lord on whose mantra we are doing. We cannot do it mechanically, though it will help. It will create some breeze. You will eventually attain love for God by repetition of the name, japa, austerity, tapas, fasting and such practices. But then Sri Ramakrishna says there is another state or another situation where the southern breeze blows of itself. Then your efforts are over. So when you are done with Vaidhi Bhakti, you keep the fan down. Then the southern breeze will flow and then you will find you are getting that grace of God. So with that intense love, if it comes somehow by hook or by crook, however you, with intense yearning, if it comes, then the repetition of the name, the rituals, you don't feel like doing anything. Sri Ramakrishna himself said, I don't feel like doing. He was a very, very strict ritualistic. He used to go do puja, but then afterwards he used to sit in his room. And some devotees like him would ask, is he doing rituals now? Have we come and disturbed him? He said, no, no, there is no ritual. You can just walk in. Because he was mad with love of God. He had reached that state. When you are mad with love of God, love for God, how can you perform rituals? So we'll end here, and then uh, the ripe devotion is ripe, just as the ego is ripe and unripe. Kacha ami, paka ami. The ripe devotion and unripe devotion. Also, Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain the different kinds, giving beautiful examples. The photographic plate, which was a new thing in those days, they had to coat the glass with a chemical and then expose it for long, and then the image would be printed on the photographic plate. So he's giving that example. Thakur had observed that, and he was so curious, like a child, to ask what does it do. So we'll take those examples about ripe and unripe devotion, two types of devotion, who is a adhikari and or who is competent enough to have the second kind of devotion, and how devotion leads to God. These will be the topic of our next uh, class on the next month. So I will conclude now, or maybe we'll leave the session open to questions, question answer.